This is the Social 4 panel. Welcome to the Art of Growth, where we use the Enneagram and the best tools we can find to help you transform. We hope you've been enjoying this season on the subtypes. If you're just jumping in, you're going to want to hear some of the introductory episodes where we discuss the instincts, a little bit on our perspective, and what we're doing over the season as we're doing 27 panels. Although there is a lot of similarity between the types, there is also a lot of differences and nuances when you get into the instincts. And we are learning so much about how the actual instinctual sequence impacts the type and how it shows up differently, and why the stereotypes and the memes just don't work because of that. And so we are so glad to get to go deep on this season, and thank you so much for journeying with us through that. This week are the panels with the type 4s. And these type 4s will be discussing their relationship to each of their instincts and their instinctual stack. Before we jump into that, you can take our free instincts test to see your instinctual sequence on our website, www.theartofgrowth.org. You can also take our Enneagram test there, as well as connect with us about all of our work, from group coaching to individual coaching to working with companies, which is really amazing because more and more companies are seeing the value, the return of investment on investing in the emotional intelligence of their organization so it flows more seamlessly. I woke up this week thinking about how much better it would have been if I would have had this knowledge much earlier in my career. Not only would it have saved a lot of emotional struggles and relational conflict, but it would have also made those work relationships so much more efficient and effective. So reach out to us if we can help your organization with that. Wanted to put on your radar that we are going to have a live Q&A event around the instincts at the end of these 27 panels. So make sure you are subscribed to the newsletter to find out when that is, to be able to get tickets. So we look forward to hearing from you. But for now, my friends, let's jump into the Social 4 panel and learn from them, not only so we know how to relate to those around us, but how to better integrate this energy within us. Because all of it belongs, is important, and is part of our own integration journey. Let's do it.
All right, everyone, welcome to the Social 4 podcast. I am so excited to be here with each of you. This has been so fun for us to work through all of the panels and all of the subtypes. We're talking about the instincts and the types because when the instinct and the type meet each other and are embodied in you, it shows up differently. And so it's been fascinating to watch how the different panels and the different subtypes are showing up. And so before we jump in, I would love for you to just introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, and then we're going to get started.
My name is Maggie, and I am from Madison, Wisconsin.
I'm Amy. I'm from Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
I'm Michelle. I'm from Salem, New Hampshire.
And I'm Derek. I'm from Los Angeles.
All right. Well, we got you from everywhere in the U.S. This is great. So we're talking about the social instinct and how it matches up with the 4. And so when we think of social instinct, there's sort of 3 aspects underneath: reading and interpreting, bonding and affiliating, and then contributing to others, contributing to the herd, the group. And so as a type 4, one of the features of the 4 is this sort of internal awareness that there's something maybe missing, or a sense of something missing that needs to be complete and filled in. And so the 4 has this need that goes out and tries to fulfill that. And so as that matches up with these 3 aspects, this is what we want to find out. How does that show up? We're going to begin with the first aspect of reading and interpreting. And so talk to me about how this need to fulfill that, to fill what's missing, to find what's missing, to feel complete. How does that work itself out or interact with reading and interpreting the group?
I definitely try to discern on any given moment how I am being perceived when I'm in a social situation, how people feel about me, what people think about me, whether or not my presence is desired or enjoyed. I base my experience on how much I've affected those around me. And so if I've had no interaction in a social group of people, I will feel very down. If I feel like I haven't contributed to the group, I will drown in my insecurity. And this ends up happening through a constant reevaluation of interactions. I'll get stuck there in the head-heart loop, just going over and over how I responded or performed or behaved, how I may have been perceived or how my actions may have been interpreted. And then also interpreting all the data that I perceived, like facial expressions, tone of voice, length of response, how much silence happened, how things concluded at the end. Usually this will bring me to a conclusion of relationship status and a judgment of my own value.
Wow. That's really well said. And that's a lot of work going on internally for you. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that sentiment. And I think that it's hard a little bit in the way that it's talked about, like social environments, even in under some of the descriptions. But I think that the way that Michelle just described it, I think it happens in a group of any size with somebody that you have known forever and somebody that you've just met, that you're still kind of doing the same work to understand in this moment, am I being perceived well? And beyond that, not just am I being perceived well, but like what specifically am I being perceived as? Am I being perceived as insightful or a jerk or whatever different things? Sometimes you use that to your advantage. You cater how you want others to perceive yourself depending on the audience that you surround yourself with.
Yeah, I definitely feel that same thing on a personal level. I'm definitely always checking to see how people are reading me in a group, but I'm also looking at how that applies to others as well. When I see other people having conversations, I can kind of tell how comfortable other people are with each other and what the overall dynamics are. And so when I find gaps or things that are missing in those conversations, I might decide I have a gift that could maybe fill that role, or maybe someone else in the group would be better for that. And so I like to orchestrate by finding what's missing and then seeing what gifts in the group could be utilized in a different way.
Yeah, I really relate to all of that. I mean, I definitely can be preoccupied with this sense of what are other people thinking of me in a social situation. So I relate to that very much, but then also to what you're speaking about, Amy, in terms of the gifts of looking at what's missing in any situation leads to, I think, for me, a focus on the emotional needs of whoever I'm with, because that's my focus of attention all the time. What is the emotional need for me? What is the emotional need for whoever I'm with? And when I'm reading and interpreting someone else, it's really looking at, I want to make sure that they're heard, that they feel seen, that they feel understood, that they have space to express their authentic desires, because that's what I want for myself. And that's what I want to provide for others also.
Yeah, that's really where the empathy piece comes in, I think, is being aware of how other people are doing in the group. And I think the constant self-awareness too makes you able to step into other people's shoes and see how they might be feeling in a certain situation.
I think to some extent, like in both the way like Maggie and Amy described it, like it can inherently be a gift. It can also inherently be a total struggle and like a strength, because you act as a mirror sort of to those around you. And to some ways I've found that you can misread sometimes. And then when you project that back onto others, it can be a challenge. Not everyone, just because you perceive the way someone is interpreting something and you respond in that way, doesn't mean that it's correct. So it's sort of like there are two flip sides to that coin. It's inherently a gift. It's also inherently a challenge.
Do you find that there are times where you're more likely to misread? Does that have to do with certain dispositions of your own heart? Like if you're in a tough place or you're struggling, that you might misread because of what's happening internally? Because this is very interesting in terms of how this plays out with the social instinct. That social instinct already does the reading and interpreting, but then you're a type 4, a heart type. So you're doing that anyways from the heart center. So there's this back and forth. I'm hearing this play between how I'm doing, what I'm feeling, what other people are feeling, how they're doing, how I'm being perceived, how other people might be feeling like they're being perceived. So there's all sorts of things going on there. And so are there times where you misread? And is it because of something due to how you're doing personally, internally?
For sure. I think that if I'm feeling insecure, if I'm having a day where I don't feel really confident, then I'm more likely to read into someone's response more that it's something about me that I'm not measuring up somehow.
Yeah, definitely. I tend to read it into people's responses and even just their tone of voice, how they're looking at me, and make it about me.
So do you read differently when you're in a good place? That's open to anyone.
Yeah, I would just say, I think yes. I think that if I'm feeling good, then I'm not as likely to read into any tone or look. It's almost like I'm looking for something. If I'm not feeling good, looking for some kind of feedback that says I'm not good enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say for me that it's kind of the lens that you view it in. If I'm feeling particularly confident in myself, or I'm feeling particularly negative about myself, I tend to view all of those interactions through that kind of coloring. It just sort of tones everything to this person, this interaction is inherently against me, or it's inherently for me, because it's always about projecting it back onto me.
Interesting. So ultimately it ends up back on you.
I would say so. That's part of the introjection as a 4 is it's really a responsiveness to the interactions of the people around you. And if I'm giving off negative energy and I'm getting negative energy in return, that just sort of compounds itself onto my existing negative energy. And I think the inverse applies to positive energy.
I tend to have this fear that I won't be reading people correctly. So I often keep it inside. I may not act on my interpretation of a situation, but that means that there's no opportunity for the person to correct me. So I tend to internalize this idea that I have of other people, and it's all inferred. I might just meet someone and think I know them very well because I've invented this idea of them in my head. And it might come out much, much later to either confirm or deny whatever I've curated about them. But I often don't say it out loud or do anything about it at the time.
Wow, I'm seeing a lot of head nods as my mind explodes right there. All right. That's really, wow. Anyone else want to touch on that?
Yeah, I think for the most part, I might keep most of it inside, but I might test people. You know, I might like emotionally test them or like give them a situation where they'll have the ability to react a certain way and then judge how they reacted or something like that.
And I would say for me, the exception to that is my very closest people. Like if it's my partner, my close family, friends, I don't have that same kind of guardedness, but it definitely exists more out in the world.
Yeah, I think to Amy's statement, you craft narratives of these people around you, and you just, all of this reading and interpreting that you do of this person, you are just fabricating this image of them, whether it's true or not. And sometimes I would say, like, to some extent, especially if it's like involved with romantic relationships, like it can be very obsessive. Like you can craft this exact representation of a person, but it's purely your representation on what you've seen. And that's where, I mean, a lot of authors talking about this type specifically is that sort of like push-pull relational aspect, is because you've conjured this idea of a person, but the more that you get to know them, you sort of push away from it because it doesn't match that idea that you've conjured.
That happens both on an individual level. I would imagine it would happen at the group level too? Would you say that that's true, or does it function much more as an individual, like idealizing an individual?
I tend to see a group in its full potential for what it could be, especially when the group has discussed or established a certain set of ideals and expectations. If people aren't taking those seriously, or they haven't lived up to those expectations, I get really, really frustrated and disappointed because they're not living up to that ideal. So the ideal might be in my own head, but it might also be something that has been externalized in some way. And if it's not reaching that ideal, I get really bothered by that.
Let's talk about bonding and affiliating. Bonding and affiliating has to do with finding your group, your people, and having these touch points, these places, these moments where you can confirm the connection to each other. So checking in, having a group that is sort of, these are your people. And so how does that play itself out? How does it interact with the type 4?
I sort of have this weird kind of relationship to bonding and affiliating because, and this kind of gets a little bit to what Maggie was kind of starting to talk about, where I find that it's much easier to co-create and establish with someone that I've never met. I think that you have an even playing field, and you can start doing that kind of inventing of narratives and things. And it's the very beginning, and you can imagine all of the ways that you can interact with these people or this person or whatever. And then for myself, I'm with really close relationships. I can do the same thing once you are like in a comfortable state. But if you are anywhere in between that stranger and that person that I'm really emotionally attached to, like it's a struggle. Like I don't really know how much of myself I should give, or what side of myself I should let this person perceive me as, because I'm still sort of like feeling it out. Like Michelle said, it's sort of like testing. You are trying to identify how much you're willing to let someone in while they're kind of still on the periphery until they can be in that circle, that close circle.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I definitely feel more comfortable when there hasn't been like a history of a narrative for both ways. You know, when I know that people have opinions of me already set up, or they've seen me in a certain light, or, you know, whatever, I would rather have that clean playing field to kind of start fresh and not be judged and not judge.
You can invent a new person for a stranger. Like you can be a different person for somebody who's new. You can't do that for somebody that you aren't close with, but that you've been a few times. They already have a preconceived notion of you. And that's like, well, which person do I want them to see today?
Yeah, I can be very all or nothing with social settings. If I do not feel 100% comfortable, I can't give any of myself. I can put up a front and pretend for a little while, but yeah, I definitely feel that gap of strangers to really, really close friends.
Yeah. I mean, I would say I spend a lot of time and energy nurturing my close relationships. Like that is probably my biggest focus in life is nurturing those connections. I really don't enjoy small talk. And I try to avoid situations where it's a lot of group situations where I'm forced to consider small talk that I avoid. I prefer one-on-one interactions for sure, which might sound strange for a social instinct, but that's how it plays out for me. Except that also, like, I can meet someone on the street for the first time and learn that person's life story pretty quickly, because really I'm interested in people genuinely and want to listen and create space for people's emotions to be expressed, for their suffering to be expressed. Like I live for conversations where people are sharing their deepest suffering. Like, people often say like, I'm so sorry. I can't believe I'm telling you this. And I'm just like, no, this is good.
All the time.
Yeah, right? Do you guys relate to that?
100%.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What's funny though for me is I've realized that like if I'm meeting up with someone one-on-one, that can definitely happen. But if I'm in a group setting, it's almost like I forego the depth of conversation for the sake of having multiple touch points. Like if I'm at a social gathering, I will not spend the whole time talking to one person and going really deep with them. I will leave a conversation, even if it's going well, so that I can make sure I connect with everybody in the room.
Yeah, that's so true. I definitely also live for deep conversations, but if I'm in a social situation, I almost feel like I'm wasting time because I could be making more connections.
That's interesting. Is that true for you as well, Derek, Maggie?
I definitely align with what Maggie was saying about preferring one-on-one interactions because it allows you to get to that depth versus in a social setting, it's very much like I'm going to craft my image in this way so that these people perceive me as this. But even within a situation like that, I'm still going to try and seek out individual people in that group and connect with them. That I would much prefer to do that than to talk in front of 4 other people at the same time. Like if you're at a party, I'm going to go off to the side and chat with one person, and then maybe I'll go over here and chat with another person. But I'm not necessarily going to push myself to the center of a group to have a situation like that.
Right, definitely. I feel like I'm always kind of scanning to see who will go deeper, who I can connect with on a deeper level, but just not like so deep where it takes up my whole entire time at the party or something, because I want to make deeper connections with some other people too.
Mm-hmm.
I almost see it as its own art form. Like when I interact with one person, it's like this beautiful, creative connection. Like the intimacy is its own form of art. But I see it as like when you have so many people all together that are all doing that, it's like this web of creativity and collaboration. And so I really enjoy seeing how multiple individual connections will combine together. So I think it's more interesting for me to incorporate other people. I like having conversations with 2 other people or 3 other people and just seeing how the addition of one other person will change that piece of art and what they bring to it.
Wow.
I love that. I love describing that as the creative connection.
Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful, Amy.
Thanks.
That was wow.
Yeah.
There's that beautiful creative spirit within the 4. So this is what's great, is that there's distinctions and differences even among you, while there's also similarities. And that's exactly what we hope for, because there are no 2 types alike. Even within the instincts, there's so many similarities, but there's also some unique differences. And so it plays out in various different ways. So I can see how that social instinct is playing itself through you. And at the same time, you have deeply heart center, which the heart does want to have connections with other humans, and so that itself is expressing its way. It's making its way through the group and seeking those connections. So that's beautiful. Let's look at the third, contribution, the contributing energy to the whole, like the attention of how am I doing? Am I doing enough? Am I serving this group in the way that it needs to be served? And are they serving in the group in the way that they need to be served? And that also is part of the attention of the social instinct. And this is all for the greater good. Like this is the greater good of the whole. It has the intelligence of the social instinct is for the sake of the group, the survival, the thriving of the group. So talk to me about how that shows up for you as a 4.
When I think of my contributions to the greater good, it really, at this stage in my life anyhow, comes down to my tribe, my individual family unit, my partner, my kids, my close friends and family. And within that tribe, I think that I really contribute by creating safe spaces for people to process their emotions. When my son has something he needs to talk about, to work through his feelings, he comes to me. And I provide that for my husband and for my friends. And it feels like a really important role to create and provide safe spaces for people to reflect and grow.
And do you see if the intelligence play itself out, and this is helpful to the family dynamic, this is helpful to the group, or does your attention tend to take you more in terms of the individual themselves, making them better, and then thus it makes the group better? How does that work itself out?
Yeah, I think it's really individually focused for sure. But then if we're all feeling like we've expressed our feelings and our needs are met and we're in a good place, then it allows the family to be in a good place as well in the group.
Kind of along what Maggie was saying, I think we all know that there's a connotation with fours as being like an artist or creative. And while I do work as a creative, I work with plenty of people who are not fours, who are equally as creative as I am. But I do think that one of kind of the distinctions, or maybe just sort of a correlation, and even kind of with what Maggie was saying, is that whether you are creating a work of art or whether you are just creating a space for your family, both of those things are just about creating a space, whether that space be between a stranger and a piece of artwork, or a stranger and something else that you have made, or the people that are already within that group. I think being able to craft this particular space that allows someone to emotionally dive into what they're feeling, what you're feeling, what others are feeling, is kind of the root of what the contribution to others gets to. And I think sometimes that it doesn't necessarily look like teaching and training someone within their gifts, but can look even more like just giving them kind of the freedom to discover and explore, rather than in such like a literal training kind of way, if that makes sense.
No, it does. It's beautiful. Are you hoping for others to come into that? For you, do you feel like the desire, the social instinct in you goes, I want more people to experience that?
I would 100% say that. And I mean, like I said, I practice kind of as a designer, and I have to spend a lot of time, even in workplace settings, forming a narrative and then rallying people behind that narrative. I think that is very much a professional kind of sense of bringing people into a shared space. But I mean, ideally, like with my friends and my colleagues and on any level, I would want to give someone enough space to where they can do the same thing, whether that being rallying around an idea or a project, or just giving someone space to be open and honest about themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the greater good and the group, for me, it's really a feeling of just like the world needs more of this. The world needs more safe spaces like this. Mm-hmm. And so anything I can do to create that is to the greater good.
I think my mission is to make people feel safe and valued and special in some way. I tend to be attuned to how I can help people process through things like that. And I also enjoy connecting others to each other. I'm always looking for ways that we can all kind of benefit each other, whether it's a certain perspective that someone tends to have that might benefit myself or someone else, or if it's just a certain way that someone is comforting or can evoke joy in a person. I will kind of go out of my way to set up circumstances for connection. And then I tend to analyze whether or not my advice was taken or my perspective or ideas were accepted. I definitely. I'll base my own value to the group on that. You know, I can't just be a part of something in a mediocre way, if that makes sense. I have to be noticed in the group. I will feel extremely devalued if I'm ignored or not noticed, slighted if my contribution isn't recognized, or if someone else gets credit for my ideas or the thought and energy I put into something. And I feel like this happens to me a lot in my life. And that probably goes back to the reading and interpreting thing. But when I am noticed for my contribution, I will sit there and repeat the compliments and the words of affirmation and the gestures of approval in my mind over and over again.
There's some fire behind that for you.
Yeah, when it comes to my role in a group, I really don't enjoy being a leader, which is funny because I became a teacher. I don't know how I ended up in that position, but I almost see my role as more of a facilitator or a curator. I like to create an environment and let people come in and see what happens. I tend to have a more hands-off role. And then with my peers, it's definitely that way as well. I don't like to be the leader, but I like to contribute from the sidelines and kind of have a silent impact on the group, and to watch that play out in an unspoken way. It's not necessarily formalized. It's also like, I don't want to be the one that's held accountable for the dynamics of the group, but I get personal satisfaction from seeing my effect on a group.
It's more like cultivating.
Yeah.
I feel like.
I want to know so much more about this whole idea of creating space and curating space. And all of you are saying very similar things, that this is one of the gifts that you give to groups of people. And in one sense, like the intentionality of it, but at the same time, like I don't want to be necessarily entirely responsible for the whole thing. And so there's so much in there that's so fascinating, and I'm learning so much. So I really appreciate the level of depth. Let's move to the second, the neutral instinct, as we're calling it. That's sometimes called the second or the neutral instinct because it doesn't have as much negative or positive to it. It's sort of like, yeah, I do it. Some aspects may create some negative reaction for you, but for the most part, this second one functions that way. So if you could talk about the instinct that came in the second for you and how you use it.
My second instinct, I think, is sexual. I do very much enjoy what you would call, Joel, the sizzle, or, the spark or chemistry between myself and someone else. I absolutely love going really deep one-on-one. And when that's reciprocated by someone, it's just amazing. Eye contact is one of those things that I use to see if someone has the capacity to go deeper. If our eyes can communicate to each other, then I know I've kind of found a kindred spirit. Also, I'll definitely, speak up when I have an opinion, push the boundaries in that way, when I feel things are sort of stuck or stagnant. I think my hatred of the mundane as a 4 kind of plays on this, because I use my sexual instinct, I think, to move forward out of the mundane through like risk taking or a desire for adventure. Also, I'm extremely good at adapting to new environments.
Yeah, I feel that same exact way. Sexual is my secondary instinct as well. I think at certain times in my life, I've kind of seen it play out more strongly. Definitely when I was younger and I was searching for a partner, it was almost like my main focus was to make myself marketable or attractive to a specific person. And I feel like once I got married, that kind of satisfied the one-on-one desires that I had. So it's not as much in the forefront for me. I don't really have as much of a desire for competition as I used to. Like I still sense though, that jealousy can come out if I see that other people that are similar to me are outdoing me in a certain category. I like meeting people that are very, very different from me. And I feel like there's no sense of comparison, but whenever they're similar enough to me that they're kind of infringing on my territory, I get defensive of that.
Absolutely agree. My second subtype is sexual as well. And I think that it was something that when Joel and I talked, I originally was kind of under the impression that sexual was my first subtype, because I do kind of latch on to some of the more risk-taking attributes of the sexual. But I think that more stems from a restlessness, kind of what Michelle was describing, of this restlessness for the mundane. I think that sexual kind of peaks when that restlessness reaches a critical mass. And it sort of forces that breaking of kind of the norms to say, we're going to change things. We're going to do something big. We're going to take a risk. We're going to lead. We're going to do whatever it takes to get out of this mundane. That being said, I think the social is more dominant because there's always this kind of tempering that's happening from the social side that's saying sometimes it's okay to break out of that and to lead, but you really need to like boil it back down, because what are people going to think of this if you're going too far, or if you're trying to you start worrying about how you're being perceived in the midst of taking the risk. And so you sort of start your social self starts to pull you back and keep you reminding yourself that like, hey, you still have to watch out for all these people. You still have to maintain your composure and make sure that they perceive you in a good light and not a risky light, or just some sort of extravagant way.
Well, I'm the odd one out. So self-preservation is my second, and I'm very strongly second. So I use that to take care of myself and my family and create a cozy home. You know, I try to get enough sleep, and I like to cook and garden and get enough exercise. Sometimes get outside at least, and live a frugal lifestyle. My husband and I both work part-time, and we're choosing to homeschool our kids, and he's strongly self-preservation first. And so we kind of work together to create this alternative lifestyle together.
So let's move to the third, because this is the one that causes us problems. This is the one that we find to be the one that creates issues for us in our lives, particularly the older we get. You know, it's fine when we're young. We could just sort of run, you know, in our teens and early 20s. But then something starts to shift, and we start to notice like this instinct is creating a problem for me. And it's the third one, the one that we struggle with. So for three of you, we know it'll be the self-preservation. For one of you, it'll be the sexual. So talk to me about which one it is for you, and what problems has it caused you, and how you're growing through it, how you're integrating that instinct in your life.
So self-pres is definitely my weakness. I will neglect myself and my family for an opportunity to be creative, to connect, to go over and above making someone feel special. I will deprive myself of sleep, nutrition, downtime for the sake of pretty much anything else that I value. I find it comes out in, you know, I see cleaning and organizing, though I am really good at it, I find is like just a waste of time. It's such a waste of time. And so I have a hard time, you know, keeping my house cleaned and organized. And that definitely causes problems with my 4-ness, because, you know, we want the aesthetic, we want the space to feel good, and we want it to feel, you know, nice and in a reflection of ourselves. And so, I think that's where it's really caused me a lot of depression and anxiety and stuff like that. The way that I'm trying to grow through that is just by forming habits, starting small. You know, I really can't indulge my laziness as much as I want to, because I have 8 children. And so I'm kind of forced to take care of them and take care of the house and, you know, the stuff that's right in front of me. And so I'm just, you know, trying to form habits and do things more consistently. And also I've found that just, you know, if I think about it too much, I'll be paralyzed and I won't be able to move at all. And so if I just get up and do something, that's something that has helped me to just break out of those feelings and all those thoughts.
You just said 8 children completely casually.
I know.
Like it was, you know, like I didn't move. I'm not sure I moved past that statement.
Well, it had to come out somewhere. So.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
I definitely relate to that sense of just not wanting to contribute to the mundane, just not wanting any part of it. And for me, that also comes out in my home. It's just such a never ending thing. So I don't feel comfortable in my own home. And I never saw that as a big deal, but I've been starting to realize how much it affects me. Whatever my environment looks like will start to affect my internal space. So I'm trying to make a greater priority of it because it is so important internally. So I think for me, the only way I can really start to make progress is by taking really, really small steps, like setting a 5-minute timer. Like I can commit to 5 minutes.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Having self-preservation is the instinct I struggle with most. And I think that even just on the Zoom call, like everything that is out of frame here is in disarray, but what you perceive looks good. And
it looks amazing.
and that, I think that's part of it is like you cater this image of yourself, but sort of you can be in absolute disarray internally because you don't spend time sort of cultivating those parts of your life to help you flourish. And I think for myself, especially throughout the lockdown over the last year, it's been really, it's required like intense discipline just for very small things. But I think when you can turn a discipline into a habit is where you start to kind of change it changes how you perceive it. Like as an example, I'm terrible at washing dishes. And there was a point that I had okay, we're going to be stuck in this apartment forever. So let's just do the dishes finally. And now that's become like a part of my day and a part of my routine where I listen to a podcast and it's this time that's for me. But I have to create a space in order to do that. I couldn't just go and do it. Like I have to say, this is what I'm going to do in this time. And then I think additionally, like separating myself from social media, I think you as a 4, it is just, it's
consuming.
Yeah, it is a slippery slope. And so if you can, once again, create a safe space for yourself to kind of inhibit or keep from kind of going into those spirals of how do I get this for myself? If you can do that, then you can actually start to focus on how you can make yourself rather than in the image of everyone else.
I love that. One of the things that's really wonderful about that is sort of the deliberate movement I'm hearing in you. Like we're doing this. Like I have another type 4 client who said this to me. She says, I literally have to say, this is what we're doing, like to myself, like this is what we're doing right now. This is the action step we're taking, because of how you can just get easily caught up, being a heart type, caught up with the social sexual instinct, which is people, and relationships and so on. So, but I'm dying to hear from Maggie. I mean, this is going to be interesting for how that has got to shift for you, because you have the self-pres that's second and strong that sort of pulls back on that a bit. So how does that play out for you?
Yeah. So for me, taking direct action is a really big challenge. Taking action, communicating my needs really directly is hard. Setting firm boundaries, taking big risks is hard. Those are all challenges for me, with sexual being at the bottom of my stack. So, and then when I don't communicate my needs directly in the way, or you set the boundaries that I need to, like I have emotional outbursts once in a while that are like,
sure,
because it has to come out somehow. So I guess those are the challenges. And then the way I'm working with it as well is, I think awareness is really key. Just putting attention on it. And I have a couple of practices that I do on a regular basis to create space to reflect. I have a group that I'm a part of, a contemplative writing group and an intention setting group. And in both of those spaces, I can look at my areas of struggle and really focus on how to take some leaps, how to take action, how to set better boundaries. I really need to devote space and time to it. It's hard.
Yeah, I mean, that's brilliant. And that's what it is. It's small steps. You know, when we say that's fantastic and we celebrate small steps, somebody may laugh at that and be like, you're over the top with that reaction. It's absolutely not. It's precisely that's the way to grow. Like the weekend warrior style of growth is unsustainable for any human. And we don't see any sustained development or growth. And there's plenty of support now in science behind that. So what we're looking at is the small incremental changes that we're making. And so that's what I'm hearing from each of you. It's fantastic.
Yeah, the greatest of transformations are in tiny tweaks, not in large leaps. So what Amy said is exactly right. It's that 5-minute increment sometimes. I was just listening to a podcast, was talking about that. Like the point of a meditation practice is to keep it. And so where does he recommend starting? 2 minutes. 2 minutes. So I love it. I think what you're talking about, your transformational practices, what you're leaning into is exactly right on. It is these tiny tweaks that make the difference over time. So it's beautiful.
And they serve your other instincts. I mean, that's the thing that's wonderful about the growth, the small amount of growth. We don't have to become equally balanced, a third across, all three instincts. It's more so of in what way is it sabotaging me? In what way is it affecting me? In what way is it actually reducing the power of my gift and the power of my contribution to the world? And many times it's because of the neglected instinct. And so, you mentioned it already. So the three of you, in terms of the self-pres, how that can actually affect you if you're not taking care of that realm, And so same thing with the sexual instinct. If that's not taken care of, it'll affect, your emotional well-being. If you're not expressing enough or talking about what's going on and risking that's risky. The self-pres, it comes in and says, oh, no, we don't do that. That's dangerous. And so, so those things are small changes that actually serve our dominant instinct in some really powerful ways. So I just want to say thank you so very much from the bottom of my heart to each of you. Just incredible, brilliant, deep, insightful, had me wanting to chase so many of these little that you put out there. There's just so much more to learn about each other. So again, thank you so very much for putting your heart out there and for teaching us about what it's like to live inside the skin of a social 4.
Yes, thank you so much. This has been an incredible gift, and we've learned from you. And your articulations are so specific to you and to your makeup and the way you're wired. And it is a gift because it's just got that specificity that's going to really help people understand themselves and others better. And so that is an incredible gift. So thank you so much. And we will see you again. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you to our 4 panelists. So I end each episode with a kind of a benediction, because no matter what the panel is, there is an energy, a skill set, a gift that we want to integrate as we want to be a more integrated being and have access to the gifts of all of these types. And so I end with that so that we think about how we need to integrate that energy. But this week, before I do that, I just want to remind you that you can take our free instincts test on our website, www.theartofgrowth.org, and you can reach out to us about coaching there as well. Make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss any of this content as it comes out. In this season, we are releasing 3 episodes a week, so this is a deep dive, and we appreciate you doing it with us and learning with us, really. Follow us on Instagram at Art of Growth, and if you leave us a review on iTunes, really helps out the algorithm that helps more people find this work. But for now, my friends, may you lean into the social energy, the gift of that. May you be wise in making connections with others. May you choose partners well, because we make friends, and as friends, we make each other. So choose well who you invite into the co-creating space of intimate friendship. But may you also be aware of the wider network, of keeping good connections with others, no matter how strong that connection may be at the moment. May you remember that we are all in this together. And from that place, enjoy the beauty of being part of something bigger than yourself. a grand human project that we are all working on together. And may you deeply know that you are an integral part of that, and become more so as you become more integrated. Grace and growth, my friends.